Hello and welcome back to Mark's House and Garden UK. I'm going to talk about olive tree pruning. I'm going to topiarise that into a lollipop. Here's one I prepared earlier. I'm going to be using these nifty lightweight handheld topiary shears. Now there is an important distinction to make when you're thinking about pruning olives. Let me explain. So those 4 olive plants that you see behind me are for topiary, so that's for shape and structure and for visual effect. Whereas this olive tree to my right is a mature olive tree, and I'm pruning this in order to produce fruit because I want to try and get some olives on that. And you would take a completely different approach with a mature tree than you would when you're just doing topiary. So let's talk first about the approach you would take if you wanted to get fruit on your olive tree, and then let's go back and do some topiary on the standard lollipops which I've got in my side border. Right, so I've repositioned the camera so that hopefully we can see the light hitting it from the sun. In order to get fruit on an olive plant, you need to understand how olive trees like to live in their native countries. So that's very well drained soil, lots of heat, lots of light and long summers. But the most important thing about olive trees that produce fruit is that they produce fruit on last year's growth. If you were to go ahead and prune all the growth off every year, you would never get any olives because they produce fruit on growth from last season. So that's the first point. The other point is they have to go through a cold winter in order to produce fruit. That starts a process which sets the buds. And I did a full video on how to get fruit on your olives, and I'll link to that in the description box below. So I'm going to leave these alone, but I have pruned them last year, and at the start of this year I've taken out a lot of the internal growth to let light in, because when they do produce fruit they want light, they want lots of sunlight and heat, which they are getting. However, there is some pruning to be done on this. Can you see all these growths at the bottom? I call these suckers. I'm going to take those off because to me they are draining resources from the plants. So what's the point of them growing down there? I don't want them. So all this unwanted growth at the bottom can come off because it's surplus to requirements. It's also in the shade of the main plant, so it's not getting the light it will probably need to produce olives. So that's olive tree pruning for fruit in a nutshell. Long, hot, dry, sunny summers, cold winters, and they produce fruit on last year's growth. Now, let's go and do some pruning for shape, some topiary. So here we are, back at the side border with the lollipops, and the effect I'm trying to achieve here is a kind of a neat, formal ball shape. That one's already been done, that's one I prepared earlier, and this one is about to be done. I've also got 2 others further down this border here, and you may notice that they're slightly smaller. And the reason they're smaller is because last winter that fence wasn't there and they were stunted by the wind coming through, so they'll have a much better year next year. Nevertheless, I will be pruning those a little just to bring them into a bit more shape. Now, most of my garden is informal. It's for wildlife, but there are parts of my garden where I like it to be formal and neat and tidy, and this border is one of those parts. I've also got the parterre at the front of the cottage, which I'm also going to be pruning today. Right, I also like symmetry. You can see how I've planted those 2 lollipops on either side of this window. So what I'll do first is I will just go in and prune this, and then I'll go back over there and do the smaller ones. This is a brilliant little tool. It's from a company called Snapfresh. They've sent me this to try out. Got 2 attachments. One's for grass and lawn edgings, although I have used that also to trim that lollipop that I did yesterday. And this is a mini hedge trimmer, as you can see. What I really like about it is it's super lightweight, and that is the battery. Look how small and powerful that battery is. That's modern technology for you. And you just swap the blades over by squeezing 2 buttons and then snapping on the next one. Now, I've been so impressed by this little handheld hedge trimmer from Snapfresh that I will be putting the link to that in the description box below this video. So if you've got the time and inclination and you want one of these, have a look. They're not that expensive, I have to say, and Snapfresh have supported me by sending it, so let's support them. Right, safety goggles in, because I'm working at close quarters, and all I'm going to do, the same as I did with that one, is I'm just going to go in and start pruning away until I start to see the shape that I desire. Now, some of these longer bits you have to get hold of so that the hedge trimmers can get into it, but once it gets a little bit more compact, just a question of brushing over it and it comes into shape. Let's try have a go at this big one here. Straight through. Not a huge thickness, but I'm very pleased with that. Now this handle has a safety button here and a trigger. You've got to have both depressed for it to work, which is why you keep hearing a clicking noise. It's me making sure that both are engaged. Now, whilst I've stopped, have you heard of apical dominance? Did you notice that that was all straggly and leggy and reaching out for the light? Well, there's a reason for that. Let me pick that up. Each branch has what's known as an apex bud at the top. And that's where apical dominance comes in. The apex bud sends back a hormone which suppresses side growth. That's why they reach up for the light. Now, if you take the apex bud off, it stops that hormone being produced and the plant bushes out. That's why and how hedges bush out when you prune them. And that is apical dominance. And that is how you can get a nice effect with topiary. That's making light work of it. One thing that I do is, as a little tip, is every now and then step away from the bush and have a look from a distance, and that will highlight any bumps that you've missed from being close up. So from back here I can see that there's a chunk here that I'd like to take off, and also down there, can you see? There's a bit round the back that you can't see, but whilst I'm here, I'll just go in. And clearly, given what I've said about olives producing fruit, I'm not going to get any fruit on these, but that's not what their objective is. Their objective is shape and structure. I'll just have a look from next to the camera. Yeah, very pleased with that. I'll go and do the other two. Now, one thing I have learned through many years of looking after olives is don't be overly cautious when you're pruning them. I can show you some video footage of these only 6 months ago when there wasn't a single leaf on either of these two plants. And look at the growth we had in 6 months. So don't be overly cautious. I know that I can understand why people are protected of these plants, because they're not cheap and they're lovely plants, but I could take that right back and it would still recover. I'm not going to. I want it to try and catch up with the other two. So I'm just going to give it a slight prune. I'll do the same here with this one. Again, not too much, because I want it to try and catch up, but I'll just tidy it a little. Right, I've just injured those plants, so another thing I will do whilst I'm at it, I'll just put some slow release around the base of each of these so that that can leach down into the soil and help these to repair themselves. Bit that needs to come off just there. So there we go. Olive trees, olive tree care, olive tree pruning, and my wonderful little brand new toy, my Snap Fresh cordless hedge trimmer and grass trimmer. Check it out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon for some more olive tree pruning adventures. Bye for now.